I forgot how much am I being paid to be here?
Let's move on.
I'm out of here. All right, see you guys.
All right, what's going on today, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Music Production Hot Takes, and today we have Navie D. Navie D is a music producer with a YouTube channel. He does very interesting and to-the-point tutorials, as well as breakdowns of how some famous beats are made. Definitely check him out if you haven't. I'll link him down in the description. We're gonna give you our answers to your spiciest questions. Some of them may be funny, some of them may be terrible, some of them may be great. We'll find out. All right, hip-hop producers are generic. Not all of them, but most of them. Very basic with a lack of feeling. One of the best produced tracks, in my opinion, is Jaden Smith's Icon. That backing track made the song. So I don't know that song, but I think we can go off the rest of it here. I don't think it's generic, but like I do think it's often simple. The rapper, a lot of times the rapper will pick simpler beats because there's room on it. And then if they do want to add something more complex, they might afterwards with like a studio musician or something.
All hip hop would almost be the opposite in that maybe that's like a modern day hip hop has that problem, but like so much hip hop pulls from different samples and sounds, and like there's so many different BPMs to hip hop, whereas for something like for other genres, there's like a very rigid window in which you have to structure it. I think hip hop has the potential to be more sort of versatile, but maybe this is a problem with very current modern hip hop production. But I would say I just disagree that. I just want to let the audience know that Weaver said I have to take my shirt off at the end of this video to get views. He's forcing me to do this, everyone. I believed that the fact that most hip hop producers are unknown has to do with the rappers themselves because they don't promote the producer as much. It's the rapper's wrongdoings that lead to this. And this example is look at NWA and Dr. Dre. He was shouted out a lot of times, and he built a reputation around himself because of that. It's a hot take. I think that maybe my own opinion on this is something that a lot of producers will disagree with, which is that I think the responsibility falls on the producers to like hype up their own names and to sort of ask rappers to do it for them, look to outside sources, and like try to get people to do it for you is just always going to lead to disappointment. His example I don't think is necessarily correct, because if Dr. Dre was purely behind the scenes, I think he would not be as popular. It's the fact that he made himself an artist and actually rapped on the tracks that helped him get a name and establish himself. Look at Yella. He was someone who has never rapped. He's like the least remembered NWA member. So I think it's not necessarily that the other rappers were shouting out Dr. Dre and all the NWA songs. It's literally he did exactly what Pharrell and like Timbaland do, which is appear in the videos. They make themselves present in the actual performance of the songs. And I think that's why they're so popular.
I'm a bit 50-50 on this. So the Dr. Dre example here, I think since there was less producers back then, like you're more likely to be known for that. And I also do think there is a disconnect between the producers and artists. A lot of times they don't even know who produced a song, or like maybe they might in terms of like, you know, contract or whatever. I don't know if you saw that clip where there was this guy standing outside Gunna's studio with like a cardboard sign saying that he produced this song. I think Gunna didn't even know who he was.
You produce what?
I produce cooler than a bitch.
He produced cooler than a bitch.
You did it with Trey Pound? Yeah. Okay, what you did, the melody?
But also I do think the rapper is the face of the music, so there is like maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's a responsibility, but they are in the position where they could put the producer on more if they wanted to. But I also think they don't need the producer either. That's what I'm saying about it being oversaturated. They don't need the producer, so they don't really need to do anything for them.
Yeah, when it comes to like there being 5 producers on the track, if the rapper's like, well, which one of these guys should I promote? Which one actually did what? Like they're probably just as confused too.
Exactly. That connects into another hot take that I don't think we included. That often there's 5 producers on a track. Like, yeah, how would they even? Who is the producer? You know what I mean? Who is the main one? Probably the one that sent them the track, and sometimes the one that sent them the track may have done the least amount of work too.
Yeah, it just might be like a middleman who's just like, yeah, I'll add a snare and I'll take 10% or whatever.
Yeah, probably more than 10%. I'll take 99%. You know what? I'm going to take 100%. I thought this one was kind of wacky. I'm not sure if they were serious or not. Ableton intentionally made Groove Pool confusing and convoluted in live because purists in Berlin hate swing, and under no circumstances whatsoever do they want you adding it to your music.
Yeah, I'm not a big Ableton guy, but this sounds like some conspiracy wildness right
Like,
now.
how familiar are you with Ableton?
I've seen people use it. What is he referring to here?
Ableton has this Groove Pool feature where essentially you can add groove to any clip you want. You can pick pick a groove, you can make your own groove, you can change the amount that it applies it to certain clips and whatnot. I think he's kind of overselling it. I don't think it's that complex. I do feel like it's a little bit out of the way. But I found that one pretty hilarious. I think this person might be trolling. Maybe it's like 50% trolling, 50% serious. I mean, I'm just imagining like Ableton headquarters. They're like, all right, in the new update, make sure to hide the groove pool a little bit more.
Maybe FL Studio paid the employee to suggest it. And now look at where we are. Putting weak drums over a melody loop isn't producing. So this is something that I remember talking to a few of the producers in my community. We just have different terms for different things. And the way I think about it is producing is different from composing. What's more accurate is to say that that isn't composing. But I think doing things like that is exactly what producing is all about in a more traditional sense, where music producers were the ones who just selected different ideas from the band or from the artist that they're working with, and they would just have suggestions of, this works very well with this, maybe cut this out. And I think when people use samples, use loops like that, and do very simple things like that, they don't get appreciated it because it doesn't seem like it's hard work, because they're not necessarily composing. But I think this is exactly what producing is all about. It's whoever can make the best decisions, whoever has the best taste, whoever has the best judgment, and whoever can make the right pairings of sounds for the song to have the biggest impact or be the most popular or be in the top charts. That's exactly what producers get paid for, not necessarily for their composing skills. And I think people just muddy those two terms up often, which actually ties to the other hot take, which I actually agree with here, which is DJ Khaled is a great producer. So this is something that you seem to not agree with. So let's hear your take here.
It's hard to say because I don't know exactly what DJ Khaled does behind the scenes. I think part of the reason he gets so much hate, though, is because he puts himself out there so much. The tags on the beats and stuff like that. If you look at someone like Rick Rubin, he pretty much just goes in there and makes the production decisions. I mean, I definitely probably respect Rubin a bit more. I don't know if I think DJ Khaled's a great producer, but one reason I think he's not a great producer is the fact that he seems to only just grab well-known artists and put them together. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a little bit lazy in that aspect. While he does make that happen, I think it's more so a matter of connections.
Yeah, I guess fundamentally though, when he puts music out, there's a very long time span where whenever he put an album out or a single out, the songs would go number one over and over again. And fundamentally, if you're an artist and you want to work with a producer, that's what they seek, to have someone come in and help them chart and become more popular. So again, when it comes to producing, which is the ability to make good decisions and choose the right sounds and choose the right artists and pair them well together, I mean, that's fundamentally what producing is. And to your point, he catches a lot of flack because he puts himself out there as, I'm making this music from scratch, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and he sort of puts down what other producers are doing. But again, I think this goes back to composing versus producing. We have no idea what he does behind the scenes. It doesn't seem like he might be the best composer in that he's putting the sounds or creating the sounds, creating the melodies, creating the drums. But in terms of pairing the right people with the right sounds and which instrumental to pair with which artist, I think that's the definition of the sort of traditional producing that we talked about.
Sound design and being too cool to use presets is a waste of time for most producers. Overall, being too obsessed with the uniqueness of your sound is either inflated producer ego or a way to procrastinate. Listener doesn't care as long as the song is good. So I definitely agree that people are a bit touchy about presets. I think people would probably care less if there was less producers. I feel like they're worried that other people are going to use the same sound. If you care about it being different to you, that could be ego. It's only you that cares. Then is that ego? Maybe. I don't know. Actually, I might have to agree with this one. It can matter more in certain genres. I know dubstep and bass music, since the synth bass is such a large portion of the sound, using presets can be kind of bad, because then you're basically going to be making the same songs as other people at that point. But when it's a song that has several different elements, several different melodic elements, the sound of the sound doesn't really matter as much, because it's the melodies that work together that matter.
Yeah, I guess I have a very similar perspective in that, you only have so much time in the day to focus on which skill you want to grow. When it comes to being a producer and composing, those are very hard skills to learn. And if you want to throw in learning how to be a master sound designer, I think at that point you really have to think about what is it you're trying to achieve and what is success to you. If you think that being a master sound designer is your road to, getting placements with the rappers, I would probably say no, for the exact same reasons that you said, which is most people just don't care. But yeah, you're right. With other genres, the uniqueness of your sound is what really helps you stand out.
No song needs more than 4 tracks. It was good enough for the Beatles, 8 if you want to be a fancy pants. Where do we start with this one here?
How's that even possible?
I mean, the only way I could see even consolidating it that low would be if like all the drums were on a single track. It really depends on the genre. The Beatles, that's just one specific band in a genre of music. Not all music is the exact same. A lot of it has a lot more progression throughout the song. Not that the Beatles don't. Yeah, I also don't believe that all of their songs didn't have more than 8 tracks in them. I'm not a Beatles expert though, so I could be wrong, but I don't know. I just have a feeling that it wasn't always less than 8 tracks.
There's an interesting idea within this, which is that I think a lot of producers do have that sort of idea in their head that the more tracks they use, the better the beat is, and the more skillful and impressive the beat is. And with that, I would say that I agree, which is that I think oftentimes for producers, they have this sort of trajectory in their sort of career where they start off, they're only able to use like 8 sounds in their beats all together, and it sounds like junk. And then they get better and better, and then they try to use more and more sounds. Still sounds like junk, but they're able to put together more and more ideas into their beats. And then it's the amount of tracks like inflates. And then as they get better and better, it actually tends to deflate, and they go back to like a little bit more of a minimal design, and they just have better understanding of like which sounds to use. So there's an idea of like, don't think that more is better. And oftentimes, I think that makes a little bit more sense, but to think that 4 tracks and that's all you need for every single genre, that's a bit wild.
So a long time ago when I first started producing, I would like make these beats that had like a shitload of sounds, probably way too many things going on at once, and like I wasn't really too focused on like music theories. It was like a big pile of shit essentially. And like one time I went over to my friend's house. I think like he may have been like withdrawing from some sort of drug or something, but I basically played him one of my beats. And like, I don't know if he was like just throwing up anyways. Like, I think he might have just been throwing up anyways, but I played him this beat and it instantly made him throw up, it seemed like. And the funny thing is like after that, it wasn't just because of that, but like in general, I started kind of like going more minimal.
Do you still use that friend to like gauge if your beats are good?
No, no, I haven't seen him in years, but like, I always think it's a funny story because it was just kind of like a moment for me. I was like, wow, this beat is powerful. No, I was kind of just like, wow, this beat is like, it kind of had maybe too much going on in it, This is like maybe like at least like 10 years ago. It was a while ago, like a very long time ago.
There are certain rules you have to follow in order to make a beat sound good and get an artist on it. It's not complete freedom like everyone says. The last part I definitely agree with. There's this sort of idea that I see in my YouTube comments every once in a while, especially if I do like fixing your beat type of video that I used to do. Whenever I would point out things like, here's an idea that you can try to think about to improve your beats, there'd always be someone saying, music is purely subjective. Don't let this guy sway you. I fundamentally disagree with that. I think with every art form, there are like fundamental principles that you need to at least consider or think about or get good at the very beginning. The fundamental idea is that like in order to break the rules, you should at least know them, because you can at least understand the context, and like that's how you make interesting music, by breaking very specific rules that people might take for granted and do something a little bit more novel. Whereas if you're just fundamentally breaking all types of rules and like you have no idea what it's like this genre you're trying to make it supposed to sound like, that's just how you end up making your friend vomit all over themselves. I think that's how that's done.
My god. So like a beat has to be on beat, you know what I mean? And there are typical drum patterns that you would follow for certain genres. And then like to go beyond that though, you could break certain rules like sliding the hi-hat a little slightly out of time, or like, swinging certain things here and there. And like it doesn't always have to be on the grid. But generally, it does kind of correlate to something being on the grid in some fashion. Like the swung kick could be like on a triplet grid or something, you know what I mean, that you may not have pulled up. Sometimes a broken rule is still a rule. Sometimes you can just like throw shit at a wall and it might follow some rule or break the rule intentionally. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a monkey on a typewriter.
Yeah, but I guess like fundamentally, if you break all the rules and everyone you play the music for says this is not good, I think that's when it's time to think about, maybe
Yeah.
I should learn the rules.
I hate it when producers who make drum kits say their sounds are unique, but it's just the same 3 spins 808s with distortion and sounds that just sound terrible that nobody is gonna ever use, then charge so much for it. I guess like you just gotta really be careful about what kind of kits you buy. Like you gotta, I don't know, and it's really hard to tell what to buy. A demo could sound a lot better than when you actually buy the kit.
Yeah, I guess I'm very trepidatious. I know a lot of creators put out their kits and stuff. For me, I've only put out like one paid one and like a couple free ones. I don't know. My fundamental idea is just like, is this something that producers actually need? Is this yet another sound drum kit in the sea of millions and millions of drum kits, the thing that's finally going to help my audience or a new producer finally unlock the ideas that they need? I just sort of think that, especially with like Splice and like all these new websites, I think everyone has a good amount of resources at their disposal. And I think oftentimes always putting out new stuff is just feeding into a lot of people's desire for like novelty and newness, but does it really help them at the end of the day?
I thought about doing kit reviews before, but I feel like it's like really hard to, there's just so many, it's like hard to even have comparisons for other kits. There is probably an opening in the market for someone to do kit reviews, but you'd have to be very critical. There has to be a lot of like discretion in like what's good, what's unique, because I think when people are buying drum kits, they're looking for something unique.
I think if someone wanted to do that, they would have to like know the entire compendium of where every single sound came from. Because like you said, there's so many recycled sounds that like a person would have to know, oh, this sounds exactly like this kit that came out 4 years ago or something. It just seems like it would be impossible to know. Has it ever happened to you where you sit on the toilet for so long your legs start to fall asleep? It's happening to me right now.
Wait, you're sitting on a toilet? Disable your parametric EQ for a few days and start EQing without visuals. You may find your habits and mixes changing for the better. I actually haven't tried this in a long time. This may be more helpful for beginners maybe, or not even beginners, but people that aren't as advanced with their mixing, because I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but for me, when I'm EQing something, I'm not just trying to draw something that I think looks sick. Like you know what I mean? Like the visual doesn't really have an effect on what I do. You know, I still listen, so I don't know how much it would really matter, you know, but I could see it mattering for someone who doesn't know as much, because then it kind of forces you to only use your ears.
Is that something that people do? They want to draw like a sick picture of a pony inside their EQ or something?
Well, they're gonna have a hard time because it doesn't really, you can't really connect it in the way that it would make a pony. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm guessing like maybe some people, like, you know, the way it looks may kind of affect the way they EQ it, you know? Like, I mean, obviously they're probably not trying to draw a pony. I mean, if they're trying to draw a pony, like they're doomed, man. They're doomed.
Maybe that's a new art form, man. EQ picture making.
You know what's funny? I saw this meme of you. It was one of your thumbnails where you're like, do this or something like that. And it had like a picture to like a really fucked up looking EQ.
Whenever I do stuff like that, I'm like, this is going to annoy some people, but here we go. TRACKLIB is genuinely one of the most concerning developments in the culture of sampling and hip hop in general. Having one entity in charge of such a large selection of music for sample clearance is not the solution for copyright issue. It's best to do it through copyright law reform. I see the underlying concern, which is that like monopoly is always concerning no matter what industry you're talking about. But in the same regard, instead of like trying to lobby for law reform and going against the major label companies, and ultimately I don't see that being a successful solution. I think TRACKLIB is at least trying to come up with some solution. And I do think there's a assumption here, which is having one entity in charge of such a large selection of music. I mean, we don't know whether they have non-exclusive clauses or what have you. It could just be that, you know, this is completely open to competition. Another company could come in and just start doing the exact same thing.
It does kind of affect the magic of a classic sample dig and flip, you know, because you're like limited to what you can flip. I do agree with that a bit.
I agree with that too. I think their library also has some like really weird stuff in it that's just like no producer would ever use this, and so and they have also a problem with like a lot of newer stuff that just sounds so pre-manufactured. It doesn't have that same feeling that like a rare find from like the 60s or 70s would.
I could see how it could be concerning in some ways, but I don't think they don't have like that large of a selection, you know what I mean, that's going to become the thing that people only go to for. There is better music production news on YouTube than any other music mag or blog.
Yeah, honestly, I can see that.
It's like, wow, why'd you pick that one, Weaver? I can't figure out why you would pick that one. Huh.
A little bit self-serving, but
Yeah, that's
people actually still read magazines. Like
I do.
Playboy still a
Well,
thing?
well, actually, I don't read magazines, but I mean, the thing is with
Playboy, though.
magazines is it takes too long for the news to get to people, you know. But like at least with blogs, like they get it out pretty quickly. Generally, producing beats, they put beats in quotations there, hasn't been truly difficult since the late '90s. If you can't make an at least mediocre beat after producing for a year, this one's gonna be really spicy. I can tell by the direction we're going here. At least mediocre beat after producing for a year, then you should stop and sell all your gear. Wait, we're not done yet though. Wait, the average YouTube viewing producer will watch 25 hours of video and production techniques and gear for every 1 hour they spend producing. Obsessing over sonics is one way to hide the fact that you don't have very many creative musical ideas. I'm just gonna start with the first part. I do agree it used to be harder for sure. Even in the early 2000s, it was pretty difficult because there wasn't a lot of good information. Like when YouTube was first created, I remember I would watch YouTube tutorials and they would be like an hour long, unedited. Like the way they are nowadays, they're very to the point, they're very watchable. I don't think everyone knows where the good resources are either though, so I don't think you should put a time limit on how long you have to produce before you should sell all your gear.
I don't know if he's saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I feel like the fact that producing isn't hard anymore is a good thing. The fact that there's so many less barriers to entry, even financially, it's like a lot more easy to get into as opposed to having to like rent out a studio just to make music. And it doesn't require you to intern in a music studio and spend all this time to learn everything. You can do it so much more easily. And at that point, the idea becomes king. I think what a lot of producers probably don't like about this is that what also is important now is creating an audience, and that's a skill. Audience building is going to be a more and more important skill.
Having good music nowadays doesn't equate to success, because like there are a lot of like people making insane music that have 50 followers on SoundCloud. Like I see it like all the time.
This is probably going to be a very hot take from my end, sort of talking to myself 10 years ago. I think a lot of people have a sort of childlike expectation out of music in that they just want to make music and everything else is going to be sorted out. They're going to become a millionaire, or they're going to be able to pay the bills. All they have to do is wake up in the morning, make music, and everything else will take care of itself. And that's what I sort of thought music production would be like. I used to hear about these producers that make all these beats and like they get rappers on it. But when you hear like the background stories of like, I remember an Alchemist interview where he talked about he was running around New York trying to get into as many sessions as possible, play his beats for as many artists as possible. Like there was always hustle. This idea that we can just sit back and just only care about the music and have everything else take care of itself, that's never existed. It's not going to exist. And so the sooner you sort of break yourself out of that fantasy and you start learning those secondary skills, which isn't really that hard, the better off you're going to be.
I don't think we really need to answer the rest of it. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of it's going all over
just
the
like
place.
shit smeared on the wall.
A clean mix is a stylistic choice and therefore not suited for every producer. I definitely agree. I do feel like generally most genres that is the way though. Certain genres are more lo-fi for sure. I feel like one of the greatest examples in my opinion is Odd Future. The vocal mixes were always pretty clean. The beat mixes were always not that clean. It did seem to fit it at the time, and like sometimes that can be what fits. I do think there are certain like objective things about mixing that generally you're going to want to make sure happen every time. Like, you know, the kick cuts through, you know, you can hear certain elements in the mix. Like you're not going to want things masked. Okay, this is a pretty interesting one here. All right, sorry, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze.
Are you crying?
Allergic. No, I'm
Sorry,
not crying. I'm not crying. I'm not crying. 90% of music tutorial YouTubers don't know what they're talking about.
Me personally, you know, I just watch Kyle Beats videos and I just repeat what he's saying. So definitely fall under this category.
I wouldn't say it's 90%, but there's definitely a segment of YouTubers that don't like have what they're talking about on lock before they talk about it. There's literally no barrier to entry. Anybody can make a video. That's probably the reason why there are so many tutorials where things are incorrect. Another thing I want to add in here, a lot of these YouTube producers have also learned on YouTube. So if they're learning incorrect things, which they might be, they're going to teach other people incorrect things as well too. I also hate that YouTube hid the dislike bar, but there is an extension that brings it back. I feel like that was a great way to tell whether or not a tutorial was accurate, especially if you don't know what it is you're looking up at all, because then you have like no way to confirm whether or not it's accurate.
I started YouTube in 2019, I think. I'd been producing for like 10 plus years at that point, and it wasn't until I produced for artists, I made a soundtrack for a video game, I got millions of streams on my own Spotify. It was only then did I feel confident enough to be like, okay, I think I know what I'm talking about. It's wild to me that someone's gonna make beats for 6 months and be like, all right, now I'm gonna make tutorials on how to make beats. If that's like the angle that someone's gonna try to do, I think they'd be much better off going down the entertainment angle and not purely go down education. Sampling should be fair use. I'm not just talking about creative sampling like Kanye or Madlib, although that should be obvious fair use. I mean, all sampling, drumless beats that are just a loop of an old song with someone rapping over it, fair use. It's ridiculous that someone adding their own perspective and story over old music is considered infringing copyright in any case. I just think this is purely just like, I'm a producer, I want to do what I want to do without any repercussions.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure if someone took his beat and rapped over it and said, oh, this is fair use, I don't want to pay you, he'd be cheesed about it. I mean, when you're using someone else's music or creativity in your own piece of art, I think there does need to be some sort of compensation or some split. I definitely agree in some situations that we've seen it's unfair, the amount of sort of publishing that someone has to give away, but to think that everything should just be fair use is just completely absurd.
Well, yeah, I think the thing with fair use too, it has to not be taking away market share from the original product. And I feel like in this case, since there's no like guidelines set, it would be taking away market share from the original sample.
Yeah, I guess like what would prevent someone from just like copying and pasting an entire song and just changing one little thing and be like, oh, this is now my song, it's fair use, and then just some weird cycle where people are just copying pasting the most popular songs from the past and being like, hey, you want to check out this new song here?
Yeah, I'm sure there are cases where sampling wouldn't infringe on the ability for them to sell the old song. There's a lot of cases where that's the case, but there's no guidelines on where that line falls, you know? So like I feel like that's part of the reason why that can't happen. And like generally the reason why fair use works for other content is because it's like to comment on something, to criticize something, and you have to be able to show an example of what you're talking about in order for the idea to make sense. That's generally why that exists. To elaborate on this a little further, I think sampling and what is considered not taking away from the original song's market is much more subjective in this scenario than it is with commentary and criticism. Basically, if you're saying that would be fair use to sample, then it should be fair use for someone to take your beat, even like a millionaire rapper, you know? Like, so at the end of the day, like, it's like, are you okay with that? Because then basically it's going to kill the whole idea of production being a viable source for making money off of selling beats.
People are getting sick of hip hop and it's gonna die just like funk in the late 70s.
I think there has to be something to replace it. You know, people can get tired of it, but there has to be like a new thing that pops up. And there are some new subgenres, but I don't feel like they're as wide appealing as hip hop and rap and trap are. So I don't know. I think that's the only way I could foresee something like that happening.
Yeah, I think this is maybe just where I am in life, and like having been listening to hip hop since like 95 or something, I do find myself listening to it probably the least nowadays. The more popular it's gotten, I feel the same way or similarly to a lot of geezers, which is like there's not that many interesting ideas. Sure, there's guys that come around like, you know, JPEG Mafia or Danny Brown that I get excited to listen to. But I find myself listening to like more like lo-fi dance or like melodic trance and stuff like that. But again, that just might be my own personal boredom from listening to it for so long. But I do find myself not being as excited or interested from a lot of the new hip hop releases.
People over obsess about gear, rarely put out music or do anything truly productive. The same thing goes for like plugins and stuff like that too. Like if you overly obsess about the way you create something, it's going to contribute to creating things less, because it's not always what you use to create that matters.
Yeah, I think this is a trap that I see a lot of people fall into, which is that when you're making music, it's very hard to like track your progress and know whether you're doing something better or whether you're actually getting better. And I think a lot of people like replace that with like something that's at least more tangible. Like, how much gear do I have that at least feels more tangible? It feels like you're growing, you're sort of progressing. Same thing with plugins. How big is that list that you have?
Yeah, if you really want to feel like you have a lot of plugins, just buy a Waves bundle and You'll be like, okay, I have too many now. I don't even know what to do with this.
That's what I have right now. 20 plugins that I would say are my go-to.
I probably have hundreds, but I often review plugins, so it's kind of.
Yeah, so you gotta.
I still stand on selling beats as a horrible business idea / model and limits a producer's potential and understanding of their true powers.
This falls into what I see a lot of people complaining about, which is this dislike of type beats and having to fit into a very specific formula. And something that I told some of my course members recently, which is like, so few people just make that switch and reverse their thinking, which is that you don't have to change your music or your style or anything. Instead, you can just literally post your beats on YouTube, and instead of trying to fit into a mold, see which mold fits you. So try one day to see how much views do you get if you title your beat, Kendrick Lamar type beat. The next day, J. Cole type beat. The next day, Freddie Gibbs. Once one of those videos hits, you'll have a better understanding of like which types of artists sort of feel your beats sound like. But you don't have to change your beats. You don't have to change how creative you are. A lot of people just feel as though this is automatically forcing them into a box when they can just make exactly what they want and figure out which box automatically or naturally slides over what they are performing or making.
There's definitely more ways to go about it than just selling beats. So I think that a lot of people think that's the only way to make music as a producer, and it's definitely not true.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot of different ways to earn a living off of your music, but to say that that's inherently the worst way, it's just like a different model. You're putting something out and you're trying to get a little bit of value from a lot of people, as opposed to directly producing for like one artist and chasing album placements where you're trying to get a lot of value producing for a small amount of artists. Hopefully this has been thrilling, exciting.
Yeah, it has been.
Unfortunately, I will not be taking my shirt off for you. I've decided that. This is but I will take off my pants. How about that?
Okay, cool. You're like, they've been off the whole time.
Oh yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and please do not leave comments on my YouTube channel in response to this. I am not gonna listen to you, so leave me alone, please.
Yeah, make sure to check out Navie D on YouTube if you guys haven't. This has been Weaver
you.
Beats here with music production hot takes. For every person who presses like on this video, Navie D will show up in your house with his shirt off.
And give you a massage, a new massage.
And he'll give you a massage. You have to press the like button on this video, though, for that to happen. If you made it to the end of the video, comment, wow, down below. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you. Okay. I guess I'll start the recording here. Well, I mean, actually, I've been recording the whole time, just in case there was anything funny, but...
in case I said anything racist, so you can expose me?
No.
Bang Incorporated.